Hello, my name is Amy Kahn, Director of Student Financial Services at Hofstra University. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our presentation, Financial Aid 101. In today's webinar, we will discuss various undergraduate financial aid programs, how and when to apply, criteria for eligibility, and provide helpful resources. At the end of the presentation, we will answer as many questions as time will allow. Please feel free to type in your questions throughout the presentation. Let's begin. Financial aid is comprised of three major categories: grants and scholarships, gift aid, which does not have to be repaid, loans, which could be in the form of student loans or parent loans and are repaid with interest once the student graduates from college, and the federal WorkStudy program, a program which allows students to work and earn money and help pay for college in the form of a paycheck. Financial aid application time begins after January 1st of the student's senior year in high school. The free application for federal student aid is filed at www.fafsa.gov. At the end of filing the FAFSA, a link will be provided to New York State residents to apply for New York State aid at www.hesc.ny.gov. If students miss the link, they should wait approximately 3 business days and go directly to hesc.ny.gov to apply. Some, but not all other state aid programs require the FAFSA as well. See the full list at fafsa.gov. In addition to the federal and state applications for financial aid, some colleges and universities require the CSS profile application, which can be filed at www.collegeboard.org. This application is actually available before January 1st, so students should consult with the individual colleges and universities to see if the profile is required and by what deadline. There is a fee for filing the profile application. To receive federal financial aid, students must have a high school diploma or GED, be enrolled or accepted for enrollment as a regular student working toward a degree or certificate in an eligible program, also known as being matriculated, be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. If a student is an undocumented immigrant, they are not eligible for federal financial aid. Students must have a valid Social Security number. Males ages 18 to 25 must register with Selective Service, and the students must complete the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA. Selective Service is a registration requirement for young men which preserves America's ability to provide manpower in an emergency to the United States Armed Forces. Almost all men ages 18 through 25 must register. Since this is a federal requirement, it is required for qualified male students to apply for federal financial aid. And students may register at www.sss.gov upon reaching the age of 18. The principles of federal financial need analysis are based on the philosophy that paying for college is a partnership. An equitable and consistent formula must be applied to all students based on dependency status. So if the student is dependent, both parent and student information must be reported on the FAFSA. The parent contribution plus the student contribution equals the EFC, the expected family contribution. The formula is based on a snapshot of the current financial condition, meaning the most recent tax year information must be provided on the FAFSA. allowing for consideration of loss of income due to special circumstances such as unemployment, disability, separation, divorce, or death of a parent, excessive medical or dental expenses paid out of pocket, etc. These special circumstances cannot be indicated on the FAFSA. Most financial aid offices have a special form and require specific documentation for this process. Dependent students must file the FAFSA with the parent with whom they've lived the most the last 12 months, regardless of which parent claims the student on their tax return. If the parent is remarried, the step-parent's information must be reported. Who is a parent when filing the FAFSA? The biological or step-parent married to the parent the student lives with, or an adoptive parent. Who is not a parent when filing the FAFSA? Grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, aunts and uncles are not parents for filing the FAFSA unless they legally adopted the student before the student turned 13 years old. Students are considered automatically independent, meaning they do not have to include parent information on the FAFSA if they can answer yes to one or more of the questions below, and this is pertaining to the current year 2012-2013. Were you born before January 1st, 1989? As of today, are you the student married? At the beginning of the 2012-2013 school year, will you be working on a master's or doctorate program, some kind of graduate level program? Are you currently serving on active duty in the United States Armed Forces for purposes other than training? Are you a veteran of the United States Armed Forces? Do you have children who will receive more than half of their support from you between July 1st, 2012 and June 30th, 2013? Do you have dependents other than your children or spouse who live with you and who receive more than half of their support from you now and through June 30th, 2013? At any time since you turned age 13, were both your parents deceased? Were you in foster care? Or were you a dependent or ward of the court? As determined by a court in your state of legal residence, are you or were you an emancipated minor, or were you or are you in a legal guardianship? And that is pertaining to someone other than your parents. That is a very common mistake for students to indicate that they have a legal guardian, thinking that it's meaning their parents, but what it really means is a legal guardian other than their parents. At any time on or after July 1st, 2011, did your high school or school district homeless liaison determine that you were an unaccompanied youth who was homeless? At any time on or after July 1st, 2011, did the director of an emergency shelter or transitional housing program funded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development determine that you were an unaccompanied youth who was homeless? Or at any time on or after July 1st, 2011, did the director of a runaway or homeless youth basic center or transitional living program determine that you were an unaccompanied youth who was homeless or were self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? If a student is unable to provide parental data for the FAFSA, the instructions indicate, under very limited circumstances, for example, your parents are incarcerated, you have left home due to an abusive family environment, or you do not know where your parents are and are unable to contact them, you may be able to submit your FAFSA without parental information. In these cases, the financial aid administrator may exercise something called professional judgment to perform a dependency override and make the student independent. The Department of Education stipulates that none of the conditions below, singly or in combination, necessarily qualify as unusual circumstances meriting a dependency override. Parents refuse to contribute to the student's education. Parents are unwilling to provide information on the FAFSA or for verification purposes. Parents do not claim the student as a dependent for income tax purposes. Student demonstrates total self-sufficiency. Some of the most common reasons why we find students ask us if they can be independent for filing the FAFSA but really don't meet the federal guidelines are, I'm 18 years old. They think just because they're of age that they're considered independent, but they're not. Remember, the philosophy is that it is a partnership, including the parental information. I have a child, so if you remember from our previous slide, students with children must provide more than half of that child's support to be considered independent for filing the FAFSA. It's not just the fact that they have a child, they have to be supporting that child more than 50%. My step-parent is not responsible for me. I am geographically separated from my parents. For FAFSA regulations, it cannot simply be based on a matter of geography. There must be some kind of extreme circumstance that prevents that student from getting the information from the parents and communicating with them in this process. I pay rent to my parents. My parents disagree with my choice of college. My parents disagree with my life choices. The calculation of financial need takes into consideration the cost of attendance, the COA, or also known as the budget, minus the expected family contribution equals financial need. The standard cost of attendance includes tuition and fees, books and supplies, room and board, also known as the dining plan, transportation, miscellaneous personal expenses, loan fees, and other documented unusual fees such as child care if the student has a child, and a computer purchase. The Department of Education allows colleges and universities to build in these estimated expenses other than the direct charges that will appear on the student bill, like tuition and fees and room and board. So if families want to borrow loans, they can borrow up to that full cost of attendance and get a refund to help pay for those other expenses like their transportation to and from college. In simple terms, the EFC is the minimum amount the FAFSA calculates the student family should be able to come up with to pay for college. Due to varying costs of education at different colleges and financial aid packages they offer, the actual contribution to pay the student's bill may be more or less. Therefore, it's best to think of the EFC as an index number for aid offices to determine the amount of federal grants if the student's eligible, and determines whether the student will be eligible for need versus non-need-based aid. Other resources will also reduce the student's financial need, including private scholarships, employee benefits such as tuition remission or tuition exchange, high school and community awards. Types of gift aid include institutional from colleges and universities, federal, state, and private grants and scholarships. The federal grant programs are the federal Pell Grant, the FSBOG grant, and TEACH grants. From New York State, we have the Tuition Assistance Program and a variety of other grants and scholarships. Scholarships and grants can be based on a variety of factors such as academic achievement in high school, standardized test scores, and for students who demonstrate strong leadership. Also based on talent such as music, art, drama, athletics, etc. Participation in activities such as ROTC, extracurricular activities, community service, etc. They may also be based on heritage, such as ethnicity, religion, child of alumni, and based on financial circumstances. Where to look for gift aid can include the college or university, the government, the federal and state governments, high school. Many high school guidance offices maintain binders or bulletin boards of resources for students. In the library, newspaper, professional associations, and religious organizations. Other resources for scholarships include scholarship search sites, such as fastweb.com, scholarships.com, collegeboard.com, and finaid.org. You can find a list of useful resources for scholarships and grants by state at the links below, collegescholarships.org/scholarships/states and collegescholarships.org/grants/state. Families should ask each college and university about its specific policies and procedures regarding college scholarships and grants. Is there an actual application, or are scholarships awarded automatically based on the admission application? What are the application deadlines? Are the funds awarded by different departments on campus, such as admission, financial aid, the athletic department, and alumni office, by the department major? Are the funds renewable versus a one-time award? Are there any limits, like are they limited to a certain number of semesters? Are there renewal criteria, like a minimum GPA to renew the award? And what happens to the funds if the student changes major, if they've received a grant or scholarship that is specific to that major? The federal Pell Grant is used as the foundation of the financial aid package. They must demonstrate exceptional financial need to receive the Pell Grant. It's awarded to eligible undergraduate students pursuing a first baccalaureate or professional degree. The actual award amount is based on a sliding scale based on the enrollment status and the EFC. The maximum annual award for 2012-2013 is $5,550. The Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, FSBOG, is awarded to undergraduate students pursuing a first baccalaureate or professional degree. It's awarded first to students with exceptional financial need. It's awarded on a first-come, first-served basis. Priority is given to federal Pell Grant recipients, and the maximum per year is $4,000. The Federal Teach Grant is awarded up to $4,000 each year. It is not need-based. It is awarded to undergraduate and graduate students who intend to teach in a high-need field in a public or private elementary or secondary school that serves students from low-income families. There is a service work obligation required after the student graduates from college, or the grant converts into an unsubsidized Stafford loan. The New York State Tuition Assistance Program, TAP, is awarded to full-time undergraduate students. These must be New York State residents, only attended a college located in New York State. Students must first file the FAFSA. A link is provided at the end to hesp.ny.gov. Dependent undergraduate student awards range from $500 to $5,000. Independent undergraduates range from $500 to $3,025. It's based on the New York State net taxable income plus any untaxed state pension income of up to $80,000 for dependents or married students with dependents, up to $40,000 for married students without dependents, and up to $10,000 for independent individuals. The Aid for Part-Time Study program is awarded to New York State residents only attending college located in New York State, undergraduate students enrolled for at least 3 credits but fewer than 12 credits per semester and must maintain a C average. The students must apply directly with the Financial Aid Office for this program. The maximum award is $2,000 a year. And the New York State net taxable income for dependent students is up to $50,550. For independent students, it's $34,250. Types of self-help aid include loans and employment. The education loan programs comprise of the federal Perkins loan, the federal William D. Ford Direct Loan Program, institutional loans, and private loans. Employment can come from the federal WorkStudy program, other institutional employment programs, and off-campus employment. Federal campus-based programs are funds that are allotted to individual colleges and universities on a yearly basis. Colleges have flexibility within certain parameters to define the award criteria and the award amounts. These funds are awarded on a first-come, first-served basis. They are all need-based, and these are comprised of the FSBOG grant, the Federal Work-Study program, and the Perkins loan. It should be noted that not all colleges and universities participate in any or all 3 of these campus-based programs. Federal Work-Study is a need-based program. Most jobs are on campus where the student can work and earn a paycheck. They're based around the student's class schedule. The earnings do not count against the next year's FAFSA. And this program really helps students build their resume and make connections for future positions, as well as provide a resource for a future job reference or reference for an application to graduate school. Loans. The federal education loan programs are comprised of the subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loans. These are student loans. The federal Perkins loan, again a student loan, and the federal Parent Plus loan, the parent loan. Other loans families may consider to help pay for college are alternative or personal private student loans and home equity loans. There are 2 types of federal Stafford loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. The subsidized loan is need-based, whereas the unsubsidized loan is non-need-based. The subsidized Stafford loan is 3.4% interest, which does not accrue while the student is in college. The unsubsidized Stafford loan interest rate is 6.8% interest, and it does accrue while the student is in college. Students are responsible for that accruing interest. However, these loans are deferred. They're not required to make any payments until after they're out of college. The annual borrowing limit is based on the year in college, determined by the number of credits they earn, and there is a 1% loan fee reduction from the amount of the loan that is disbursed to the schools. And again, the repayment on this begins when the student graduates, falls below half-time, or withdraws from school. Undergraduate dependent student annual Stafford limits are, for the first year in college, the maximum annual amount is $5,500. The maximum portion of that $5,500, which can be subsidized, is $3,500. In the third column, you can see we have a second additional unsubsidized amount if the parent applies for a Parent Plus loan and is denied. The student can borrow $4,000 in addition to the $5,500 for that year. And as you can see, for the second and third year and beyond, the amount increases each year by $1,000. The undergraduate independent annual Stafford limits already have that second additional amount of the unsubsidized Stafford loan built into the annual amount that they can borrow because they're independents and therefore they do not have parents that could borrow the Parent Plus loan for them. So for an independent undergraduate student, their first year in college, the maximum annual amount is $9,500. Of that $9,500, the maximum subsidized portion that they can borrow is $3,500. So the rest would be in the unsubsidized Stafford loan. And again, you can see that the amount increases as the student succeeds in their class level. There is a lifetime maximum limit to borrowing Stafford loans called the aggregate Stafford limits. For dependent undergraduate students, the maximum is $31,000. No more than $23,000 may be in subsidized loans. For independent undergraduates, the maximum is $57,500. Again, no more than $23,000 of this can be in subsidized loans. And if the student then goes on to graduate school or medical school, these aggregates are increased. But these aggregates do include the loans borrowed as an undergraduate. So no more than $65,500 may be in a subsidized loan. The federal parent loan for undergraduate students, or for borrowers being parents of dependent undergraduate students, eligible parent borrowers are either of the two biological parents of the student or a step-parent with whom the student lives if the parent is remarried. This is a non-need-based loan, but again, the FAFSA is still required to be filed. There is a credit check that the Department of Education runs to see if the parent qualifies. If the parent is experiencing some credit difficulties, they may apply with an endorser, which is kind of like a cosigner. The annual limit is the cost of attendance minus other financial aid received. There is no aggregate limit. So if you think back to our cost of attendance slide, this is what we're talking about when we say that the parents can borrow up to the full cost of attendance, including tuition, fees, room and board, and those estimated expenses for books and supplies and transportation and miscellaneous costs. The repayment on this loan begins 60 days after the second half of the loan is dispersed in the spring semester or after the third disbursement for a trimester school. However, it may be deferred until after graduation. So as long as the student's enrolled at least half-time, which for a semester-based school is typically 6 credits a semester. You're talking about 12 credits a semester for full-time, and that would be 6 credits for half-time. This loan has a 7.9% fixed interest rate, and it has a 4% loan fee. The federal Perkins loan is part of the campus-based program, so this is a limited program based on first come, first served, and students must demonstrate exceptional financial need to get this Perkins loan. The borrowing limit is determined annually based on funds available. The federal maximum is $5,500 for undergraduate students. It has a 5% fixed interest rate, and there is no loan fee. The repayment for this loan begins 9 months after graduation or drop below half-time status or withdraws. So this one gives them just a couple of months more. It was 6 months for the Stafford loan, and it's 9 months for the Perkins loan before they have to start repaying it. There are also private alternative loans that students can borrow. The annual borrowing limit is the cost of attendance minus other financial aid, like the Parent Plus loan. The lenders may impose a minimum student age of 18 at the time of application, and that's pretty much all of them. A credit-worthy cosigner does not have to be a parent, so that's one of the reasons why we find that families may go with the private loans as opposed to the parent loans, because it can be anyone. It does not necessarily have to be the parent, relative. It can be anyone who's able to pass the credit check and is willing to co-sign for the loan. The rates and terms vary greatly by lender and program of study. They offer variable and fixed interest rates. Some may require payment while the student is still in college. Some may have aggregates, which may include federal loans within those aggregates. For a list of private education lenders, you can go to finaid.org/loans/private student loans PHTML. Helpful links for financial aid resources for federal financial aid: visit studentaid.gov for New York State aid, hesc.ny.gov, and for general financial aid, finaid.org. The typical undergraduate financial aid process begins in the fall semester of the senior year in high school. So if you look, starting with our left-hand column, students should be inquiring about scholarship and grant application processes at the various colleges and universities, and how to apply and deadlines. Males, upon reaching the age of 18, must register for Selective Service. Dependent students and one parent apply for a federal PIN. That's the personal identification number that they'll be filing the FAFSA with, as well as filing for any of the direct loan programs, the Stafford Loans or the Parent Loan. And if required by the particular college the student's applying to, they would file the profile application. And again, there is a fee required for this. The second column, we see after January 1st, the students will be filing the FAFSA, and will be filing the FAFSA after January 1st each year thereafter. Students can apply for New York State aid. Again, there's a link filing the FAFSA for New York State residents and other states. You should consult the FAFSA.gov website to see the deadlines for those. Moving on to our third column, in February, March, many or most colleges and universities begin to send out financial aid packages based on the FAFSAs they've received. Some students will be required to complete verification process, where we request that the student and parent federal tax information may be submitted along with other income documentation. The Department of Education no longer allows us to accept photocopies of income tax returns, and therefore the families would have to call the IRS, or they could go online, but there is a special tax return transcript number that the IRS has set up just specifically for this purpose of requesting the processed tax transcripts. Students may be required to submit certain forms, such as the Perkins promissory note if they were awarded a Perkins loan, proof of citizenship status, selective service, registration, etc. And moving on to April and May, students must accept and decline financial aid no later than May 1st. That's the national reply date. Sooner if required by the individual college. Students complete the federal Stafford Loan entrance counseling and master promissory note during the month of May, and they would go directly to studentloans.gov to do that. Parents, if they're going to be borrowing a Parent Plus loan, must complete the Parent Plus Loan Application Request Form and the Master Promissory Note, again at studentloans.gov in May. Or if the student is choosing to borrow an alternative loan, that's the time that they would be going on to one of the lenders of their choice. You can apply right online and with their co-signer to apply for the loans. You'll notice that the toll-free numbers there for the federal government, whether it's for the federal PEN, the FAFSA, New York State, HESC, and studentloans.gov, they have toll-free numbers where they have experts to literally walk families step by step through the entire application. So we really encourage families to take advantage of those toll-free numbers and using that expert service. Some helpful federal publications can be printed off for families or just provide the links. The FAFSA web worksheet is available at fafsa.gov. Another publication, Do You Need Money for College? Federal Student Aid at a Glance for 2012-13, gives a brief overview of filing the FAFSA, and it lists the variety of federal financial aid programs that are available that we covered in this presentation. What information do I need when I fill out the FAFSA? That's a very good checklist, very good for families when they're about to file the FAFSA. Am I dependent or independent for the FAFSA? So it lists those yes/no questions that we went over earlier in the presentation for automatic independency, or so the student will be able to know if they're required to include parent information or not. Who is my parent when I file the FAFSA? Myths about financial aid. And for a complete list of federal publications, you can go onto the studentaid.ed.gov with the various publications that are available. Okay. So this concludes our presentation. At this time, we can take some questions. Okay. Okay, so the first question we have is, I am the legal guardian of my sister. Should I fill out the FAFSA or should my mom? And the answer is neither, because when a student has a legal guardian, the student is considered independent for federal financial aid purposes. So the student would only report their own information on the FAFSA. We have another question. If parents are separated or divorced, how do they file the FAFSA? Okay, so the FAFSA is filed with the information for the parent the student lived with the most the last 12 months. It doesn't matter which parent claims the student on their tax return. It has to be based on the information of the parent that the student lived with the most. And some families say, well, the student goes back and forth. They really split their time equally between the two parents, and if that's the case, then the FAFSA has to be based on the parent that provided the most financial support to that student. Okay, we have another question. To receive federal financial aid, a student has to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. What is an eligible non-citizen? Well, basically, a student is an eligible non-citizen if he or she is a permanent resident with a permanent resident card or a conditional permanent resident with a conditional green card. There are other categories of eligible non-citizens, but those are most of the categories that we see. You can find the full list of eligible categories at studentaid.gov. Should a student who comes from a financially disadvantaged family or a family who has a recent change in financial circumstances bother even applying to a private college? Is it possible to get enough financial aid to pay for a private college? Well, I say students should never roll out applying to colleges based on the sticker price. There is financial aid for both academic achievement and financial need. So the best thing to do is to tell students apply and see what you get. It is important to have communication of financial difficulties to the financial aid offices so we can look at the particular set of circumstances and see if we can adjust any institutional aid or federal aid as well. Okay, the question is, how can we get a copy of this PowerPoint? The presentation will be online within a couple of days. I would imagine early next week. Send out a link. We will be sending out a link to the participants, and you'll be able to see it online. Okay. Another question. Does a FAFSA have to be filed for each college the student applies to? Does the FAFSA have to be filed every year? The online FAFSA application is filed once each year the student is in college. So every year the student has to refile. The one FAFSA application online allows the student to enter 10 colleges to send the FAFSA to. So if a student wants to send it to more than 10 colleges, they can go right back into the FAFSA online and just change the college codes or call the 1-800-4-FED-AID number and give the additional college codes over the phone. Or if they don't have the specific college codes, they can talk to the representative, and the representative can look up that particular college for them. Okay. Another question. Can more than one parent borrow the PLUS loan in the same year? Yes, they can. They will both need to apply for a federal PIN to complete the loan application process. So just to kind of recap, when a dependent student files the FAFSA, the dependent student and one parent applies for a federal PIN. So if the parent who filed the FAFSA with the student is not the student borrowing the Parent Plus loan, the other parent does need to just simply go on and file the PIN. They don't need to file a new FAFSA. They do not. I want to make that clear. Okay, do we have another question? Okay, what does a private university like Hofstra look at to award grants and scholarships? Our scholarships are based on a combination of factors like GPA, SAT scores, the standardized scores, and involvement in activities. As a general rule, you'll find that first-year students having GPAs and test scores at or above institutional averages are offered academic scholarships. Our grants are based on filing the FAFSA. Okay. Another question. Should a student file the FAFSA even if they think the family makes a decent income and won't be eligible for federal grants? Yes, absolutely. Especially for the first year, we encourage all students to file the FAFSA. Institutional methods of awarding grants and scholarships are not necessarily the same as the federal FAFSA formula, so you never know, the students might miss out on something if they don't file the FAFSA. So absolutely, every first-year student should at least file the FAFSA that year, and then can decide from there if they want to file the FAFSA after that. Okay, another question. Is the net price calculator a good indicator of what the student might get from a particular college in financial aid? So the net price calculator is required for every college that participates in federal financial aid programs. It's on our website. This will give a rough estimate of financial aid, but it does have limitations. For example, it doesn't necessarily take into account certain talent-based grants and scholarships or athletic financial aid. So, you know, just like I mentioned before with the sticker price, you should not be turned off by the sticker price of a university as well as the net price. It might give you an estimate, but is not the bottom line. The students should always be encouraged to go through the application process. Okay. Another question. If the parent the student lives with is remarried, does the step-parent's information have to be reported on the FAFSA? Yes. The FAFSA does require that if the parent the student lives with is remarried, both the parent and step-parent's information has to be reported. Okay, what does the credit check for the Parent Plus loan look at? A parent is considered to have adverse credit history and can be denied a Plus loan if they're 90 or more days delinquent on any debt as of the date the credit report was run, or has been subject to a default determination of other types of student loans, bankruptcy discharge, foreclosure, repossession, tax lien, wage garnishment, or write-off of a debt under Title IV financial aid programs during the 5 years before the date of the credit report. Okay, so what are some common mistakes people make when completing the FAFSA that students should try to avoid? The first one is not asking for help. As I mentioned before, the federal aid programs do have this 1-800-4FED-AID program, the phone number for filing the FAFSA and the PIN, and they will literally walk families step by step through the whole application. Another common mistake that's made is that the student might file the FAFSA for the incorrect aid year. Especially students coming from high school are applying early in the process, and the previous aid year, or I should say the current aid year for students who are in college, is available at the same time for the following fall. So you want to make sure that you tell the students you're applying for next fall, so you would base it on that year's FAFSA. Another common error that happens on the FAFSA, people use nicknames. So the names should be exactly as they appear on the student's Social Security card. So like, for example, Jonathan, if the student's name is Jonathan, they should not put John or Johnny or any other kind of name on the FAFSA. Another common mistake is that Social Security numbers are entered incorrectly, and sometimes it's because parents are helping the students fill out the FAFSA, and the students aren't quite used to using their Social Security numbers. They haven't had enough experience with using them, so sometimes the parent will put in their own Social Security number or even a sibling Social Security number, so that's a very common error. Another common error is that families will list the income twice. They'll list it under the parent income as well as under the student. So we want to make sure that it's clear that both the parent information and the student's information is asked for in the FAFSA, and that you would be completing appropriate for each person. I mentioned before another common error that we found, especially the last couple of years, is that students were checking yes to the question that they have a legal guardian, thinking, yes, I have a legal guardian, that's my parent. But that's not what the question is asking. The question is really asking if the student has a legal guardian other than their parent. And another, probably one of the biggest issues that we find is that the signatures don't go through on the online application. So it's very easy to see if the application goes through by just going onto FAFSA.gov and looking at that status, or the student could simply call 1-800-4FED-AID and the representative would be able to look that up. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. I hope you got something from this presentation. And again, you'll be able to see the link shortly, beginning of next week. Thank you.